Hi, this is April Perry and Jonathan Bailor back with another episode of the SANE Show. Jonathan, I'm excited about today's topic.
It is going to be definitely a good one, April. I saw the notes beforehand and I was like, oh yeah. So I'm really excited.
Well, I'm giving you an opportunity today to help all of us understand why SANE isn't crazy, but we're going to talk about why it does sound crazy to a lot of people. And really, it does. I'll tell you, I haven't been living sane as long as you have. And my daughter and I and our family have had to kind of counteract a lot of different questions and issues. So today we're going to kind of go rapid fire through those and help people who either have just started going sane and are finding that they're trying to explain themselves a lot, or help people who are thinking about going sane, but who don't want to be called crazy. We'll help with that.
Well, so this may take two shows because I think you actually, you said a really good distinction there, and there was a is crazy versus sounds crazy. And sounds crazy is a really good distinction because there's a lot of things that have sounded crazy at one point in time, right? I mean, like just 100 years ago, 200 years ago, women voting sounded crazy.
That's
But
true.
that doesn't mean it was crazy, right? It sounded crazy, but it's not actually crazy. So
Just different from the norm, I guess, right?
exact. Well, and that's actually another thing we'll talk about is just how or not different from the norm sane eating is. But I think you're right on. Is something not being typical doesn't mean it's crazy. I mean, not having diabetes is becoming atypical, but that that doesn't mean it's crazy to not have diabetes, right? So I think maybe in today's show, I'd like to focus on the more macro, what do we mean by crazy? What do we mean by intentional eating? What do we mean about living an intentional life? And is that crazy? And then we can get into the specifics about, if we want to do a rude Q&A with people who are really pressing us on it, maybe in the next show. How's that sound?
Okay, yeah, that sounds awesome.
All right. So the very first thing that I think is really important is how we define crazy and how we react to people calling us or asserting that we're crazy. So the very first thing is should we even react if another human being is going to just say that something we're doing to try to improve our lives is crazy? And I think that's worth talking about in and of itself, right? If you are interacting with a person who finds out that you're consciously changing your life in some way so that you can be happier and healthier, and their reaction is that's just crazy. I mean, maybe we should talk about that first.
Yeah, well, I've been on both sides. So I'll share my first experience with this. It was probably about 10 years into her house, and she started talking about their diet. And she said, yeah, I don't have any white flour or any white sugar anywhere in my house. And at the time, I was buying that in 25-pound bags at the store. And that's what I was baking from all the time. We made cookies and breads and things like that. And I remember feeling kind of paranoid, like, oh, wait, can I still be her friend? This is really strange that she doesn't cook with these things that are just really normal. These are things that make my family happy. And I felt kind of uncomfortable around her because I didn't even know what I should say, or if I wanted to bring her food, what would I bring with her? If our family got together for dinner, what would we eat? It just felt really odd. And at first I just thought, well, is that really necessary? I mean, my family's healthy and we're generally fine. And at the time my kids were all really, really little, so no one was really struggling. But at the same time, I was still counting my calories. I was still exercising every day, and I wasn't really happy overall with how I looked, but I didn't connect it to those ingredients specifically. So I think it was just the unknown. I just felt kind of uncomfortable because I didn't know how to connect with her. So I think, does that seem like that's pretty common?
I think that's incredibly common in April. And what I want to really empower our listeners with in this episode, and we can get a little bit more concrete, but I think sometimes understanding a deeper side of things, not just the surface side of things, can really help people as they try to make long-term change. And that's if someone is there are issues. Sometimes other people may or may not have issues, and their issues are then projected onto us, right?
Yes.
So if we live our lives trying to never make another person feel uncomfortable because we're doing something that they maybe think they should be doing or know subconsciously on some level that they should be doing and they're not doing it. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of really smart people all throughout history that have made quotes something along the lines of society and everyone in it is going to continuously try to bring you back to average. Like no matter what, the second that you stray from average in anything, forget about food, anything, you will make people uncomfortable. I mean, this is not a show about finances, but how many people are like, oh my gosh, if I start making money or if I get a lot of money, people are going to feel uncomfortable around me. Or if I have this level of income, or if I have this appearance, or if I date this person, or I marry this kind of person, or I do anything. I mean, honestly, anything is going to offend someone who isn't doing that other thing. So, I mean, that's why kind of from a macro perspective, if our goal is everything that we do, including how we eat and what we put into our body, is accepted by everyone all the time, there's nothing either of us can say or anyone can say on any podcast anywhere that's going to allow us to reach that goal. So I think sort of maybe challenging that goal and actually taking pride in the fact that if you want exceptional results and you want to live an exceptional life, you're going to be doing exceptional things, and those things are going to take you away from the norm. But because they're taking you away from the norm, they're going to take you away from the norm. The norm in this country is to be overweight. The norm in this country, like, I think it's something crazy like 1 out of every 3 adults is either on or has been on some sort of antidepressant or antipsychotic medication, right? So diabetes is becoming fairly normal. Overweight is becoming fairly normal. ADHD is becoming normal in quotations in children. Depression is becoming normal in adults. So deviating from the normal is okay. Maybe that's kind of the key takeaway.
I love that. Well, it reminds me of the idea of putting a whole bunch of crabs in a pot. Have you ever heard about this? You know, how you don't have to worry that they're going to escape, because anytime a crab gets close to escaping, the other crabs will just pull it down right back in. And so I think that you're right, that there's a natural tendency for us, which is kind of sad, but I know I've been in that situation before, where you feel this need to pull someone down who's doing something maybe better than you are. And as my husband and I were actually talking about this same idea the other day, he just said, you know, there's this cognitive dissonance that's created when you see someone doing something you know you should do, but you're not doing it. There's just some distance. So you either need to A, change your life and start doing what you know you need to do, or B, you need to decide in your mind that that person is crazy, right? But I think that there is a way to do this that doesn't need to be holier than thou, I'm better than you because I don't eat sugar, that type of thing, because that's been uncomfortable for me to be around when someone is trying to talk about a good habit they have, but they at the same time are trying to build themselves up by putting other people down. You know, I think you have to be really careful. So I think it just becomes an art. I think you're brilliant at this, being able to live your life and do the things that you know you should be doing without ever coming across as judgmental or as though you're trying to just build up your own ego by doing these things, that you're really doing it because you have a deep why.
April, that's the key point there. And that there are ways that so I mentioned my last sort of soapbox rant was about how we can't control other people's perceptions, and other people's perceptions are going to be, you know, bring you back to the norm no matter what, by and large. However, you're exactly right that we can either help or hinder that process very easily. I think probably a lot of people have had an experience like you're describing where I don't mean to pick on vegetarians, but they're just maybe the most intentional. It's a lot of people know at least one vegetarian, and depending on the vegetarian that you know, there are some vegetarians who, let me give a concrete example. So we had Thanksgiving last year at my in-laws' house, and they're absolutely awesome. And my brother-in-law brought one of his friends, and she's a vegetarian, and she is what I would call an awesome vegetarian, because she said, you know, she made it very clear that she wanted nothing changed about the meal at all. She wanted the meal to be exactly the way it was going to be. She was going to bring some additional dishes, and it was just a complete non-issue. It was just like, oh, hey, yeah, no, absolutely. I'll have some of that, not turkey. I'll have some of those sweet potatoes. hey, I brought some tofurkey. Would you like to have some? It was a complete like, hey, I'm doing this. We're not going to talk about why. Non-issue. It added some spice to the mix. You know,
Yeah.
something different going on. And contrast that to a story, for example. It's a story my mother shared with me after I told her about that Thanksgiving holiday. And she said that one of her friends, one of their children was, because of incidents like this, a vegetarian, and they had this wonderful family cookout. And it was a big deal. So they had to purchase veggie burgers, and they made the veggie burgers made them special for this guest. And when the guest was served the veggie burger, apparently they looked at it with sort of like kind of a disdain, angry look. And they said, was this made on the same grill as the other burgers, in like a very condescending way? And it was, and they said, well, I'm sorry, I just can't eat this. I can't even believe you'd serve it to me. Right. So there are different ways that we can handle these situations. So let's not be that second person. How about that?
Yes. No, I think that that's a great idea. And I think that it's a skill that you develop. And I think it's something that we definitely have to teach our children, because I kind of assumed that my kids knew how to talk about going sane in a way that was normal. I don't know, a little bit normal. But then I started hearing from their friends, oh, sorry, we had some sugar. Is that okay? Are you upset? I mean, people were kind of coming to me asking questions like I was this, kind of militant mom. And I thought, wow, I probably need to work with my kids on how they can describe the eating that we're doing and the goals that we have, because it's not just me representing myself. I think that's what's important, is when your whole family is making this change, some more willingly than others, then you need to be able to know how to talk about it so that everybody can feel comfortable. And I really like that. But I like what you're saying about not being normal is okay. And I think that there are, of course, so many ways this applies to our lives. I don't want my children to be normal in the language they use, because they would be using foul language every single day. I don't want them to be normal in how they spend their time after school, because that means that they would pretty much be on video games from the moment they get home until the moment they go to sleep. And there's a lot of ways I don't want my kids to be normal. And I think that when we talk about it and when we teach the why to our children, that's what helps them, because then they think, okay, I'm not going to let my brain turn to mush just by being on a screen all day. I'm going to do other things too. And they start understanding the why. And then they're the ones chopping the vegetables, and they're the ones preparing the healthy foods and looking for better recipes. And all of a sudden it becomes this family bonding opportunity that starts to filter out into your friends and into your relationships. Because, with SANE, most people want to be healthier. Most people want to lose weight. Most people don't want to get diabetes. So when they start hearing and seeing things that are working for your family, it actually gives them a lot of opportunities to start asking questions, maybe asking for a recipe here and there. And all of a sudden, we've got friends everywhere who are making these awesome SANE dishes. And it's pretty exciting to see your influence.
Yeah, but you made a really key point there. And that is, chances are every single person who's listening to this has something they already do that isn't normal, that they've figured out how to talk about, whether it's they don't drink alcohol or they don't, I don't know. I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast has got something about them that they would consider unique. And I bet maybe there are more than one of those things. And if you have one of those things, which doesn't really actually seem to be an issue, like, think about that. Like, this is something unique about you, but it's never really been an issue in social situations. You've just figured out a way to handle it. Sometimes we treat eating as if it's different. I mean, eating is just a lifestyle choice, just like anything else, right? It's just a lifestyle choice, right? I mean, this is sometimes why I get so amped up about the everything in moderation logic, right? I mean, that the logic of just eat anything, just not too much of it. Just put anything in your body, not too much of it. Like, we would never use that logic in any other area of our life, ever. It's like, oh, just inhale anything, just not too much of it. Well, wait a second, or it doesn't make any sense. So we sometimes treat eating differently than any other lifestyle choice. So if you have a lifestyle choice that you've made that is not normal, that doesn't seem to cause a bunch of social awkwardness, what can you learn about that, and how can you apply that to your own sanity? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant way to think about it. And I love how you also teach the whole idea of progress, not perfection. I think we can't reiterate that enough, because what I found is that when I tried to go cold turkey with my family on anything that was insane, that was really stressful. And you know, what's interesting is I've been getting a lot of emails from mothers and children. It's actually been really neat to see a lot of people coming wanting to talk about this. And what I'm hearing is the question, how do I get my family to change without revolting? I hear the word revolt a lot. And I think that what's happening is when we help to understand what it means to deviate from the norm, and when we connect it, like you were doing so well, with people in history who have deviated from the norm. I mean, maybe that's something we can talk about for a moment, because I think that that helps us understand this why. I mean, yes, if we know that we're not going to get diabetes, we're not going to be overweight, we're going to be able to have healthier, stronger bodies. But I think connecting ourselves with mentors or with heroes and helping people to see that those people were also called crazy, I think that's really helpful. I remember you said your mom would say, hey, Jonathan, do you want to be like Superman? Do you want to be strong? I think that that's really smart. And so maybe what are some other ideas that you have as far as heroes or people who are also called crazy?
There's really two key ways I think we can help with this. So we've talked about some great ideas and some great concepts, but I love how you're very good at getting me to get back on track and you make it concrete. So thank you. And the two things I think we can do here, one is what words can we use with people in our own lives, like our family, to help them understand the deeper why. But then there's also some things that we can do with people outside of our family I'll call them free passes, because there are ways to describe things that are not normal that people will just blindly accept. And it's like a hack. It's a social hack. So we can get into those in a second. But for the why with your own family, I think that is extremely important. And I think one of so first and foremost, people might just say, hey, especially as a child, right? Kids, I can remember, I'm not so far removed from being a teenager. I can definitely remember what it was like to be a teenager. And although I am further removed than I was like, wow, if I happened to have a child when I was in high school, that child would be in high school right now. What the? Okay. So
I'm wow. There. Thanks.
So anyway, So as a child, you really want to be the norm, right? You want to have the same shoes everyone is having. When I was in high school, for example, it was all about starter jackets. Remember back in the day, starter jackets. Okay, anyway, so it's not. I mean, just the idea that it's crazy to choose what you eat is just factually false, right? Like it's for the vast majority. I mean, mainstream Christianity is actually the only of the major world religions that doesn't practice some form of dietary restriction, right? So like Orthodox Christianity, Mormon type of Christianity, forgive me, I'm not using the right term, Buddhists, Hindu, Islamic traditions, Jewish traditions, the Old Testament of the Bible, like mainstream Christianity is the only religious tradition that really doesn't hang its hat on some form of conscious eating. And again, it's just because it's choosing, it's being intentional, just like any way of life tells you to be intentional about the choices you make. Being intentional about the food you put into your body you're putting things into your body. So being intentional about that is probably a pretty good idea. So that in and of itself, like I think if we can kind of frame it in terms of, honestly, throughout history and even in the modern era, it is actually very, very, very typical to choose what you put into your body. I think that can be very helpful.
Yeah. Yes, agreed.
All right, so that's the first thing. It's not that untypical. It's not that atypical in the first place. And I think the key sort of hack that you can do, so that's something that I find to be helpful when talking to people who you have some time to actually sit down with and kind of get into it with, just describing, hey, what we're doing is we're just being intentional. We're just being deliberate, and we're not alone. We're not crazy. We're not on some island by ourselves, right? This is a pretty typical thing that people do. And just because the commercials you see on television don't support this, I mean, the commercials you see on television don't support a lot of the stuff you're probably teaching your kids to do. So this just falls in line with that. Now, the second side of this is, how do you talk to other people about it? So you're going to have two groups of people. You're going to have people that you're going to have an opportunity to really talk about this with. That's going to be a very small percentage. Then you have people that you just need to get through the day. And if you just need to get through the day, here's the 2 free passes you have. These are 2 things that you can tie something back to, where I don't care if it's professional, personal, educational, you get a free pass. The first is tie it to your spiritual beliefs. If you tie something to your spiritual beliefs, at least in America, anyone calling you crazy because of that is socially unacceptable. So we can call this good or bad, but if you say, like, I have to miss work, so I have to miss work because it's a religious holiday, you get to miss work and no one can fault you for that, right? So if you can tie this back to your spirituality, you get a free pass. No one's going to question you on it. The second thing you can do to get a free pass is to tie it to a medical condition. So if you can say, hey, I'm pre-diabetic, or diabetes runs in my family, so we have to avoid sugar. I mean, honestly, imagine a social parents die, or both my parents had diabetes. I'm trying to avoid diabetes. And do you honestly think any human being would come back to you and be like, oh, you crazy? You're crazy. Like, if you tie it to a medical condition or you tie it to a spiritual belief, you immediately get a pass. So those can be helpful.
And I do that all the time, actually, because both of my parents do have diabetes, and my mother has Alzheimer's, which is type 3 diabetes, as we've found out. And so, yeah, I say that all the time. And people are so understanding, so willing to just accommodate and say, oh, yeah. And then usually they say something like, well, so is my dad, or so is my grandpa. And so I think that's a beautiful way to do it as well.
And I think it's really powerful, April, because a lot of recently there was a South Park episode that made, something's becoming popular when South Park starts to make fun of it. So there's a South Park episode about people. I only saw segments of it, but I think it was basically off the gluten fad, like now everything's gluten-free and it can't eat gluten. Yeah. So obviously if you go sane, you're unintentionally going to be avoiding gluten. You're going to eat much gluten while you're sane. Yeah. But like most people, when they're like, I'm gluten-free, if the reason people will perceive that as holier than thou is they really don't have a reason. They're just like, oh, I'm just gluten-free because gluten is bad. Like, as soon as people just need quick side note. The very, very famous study was done. I hope I haven't said this already in the podcast, but really quickly, there's a very famous study done across many, many cultures where there was a line of people waiting for a copy machine, and an individual wanted to cut in front of them to make a copy. And they said, excuse me, I'm in a hurry, and I only have 2 pages to copy. May I cut in front in line? And people, like 93% of people said yes. Okay, so she gave a great reason. 93% of people said yes. Then they did this again, and she said, excuse me, can I cut in line? Didn't give a reason, right? Very low compliance. Like only 40% of people let her cut in line. But then they did a third thing, and this is the fun part. They said, excuse me, can I cut in line because I need to make some copies? Which is, of course, I mean, it's a reason, but it's an irrelevant reason. But what the study found consistently is the rate of compliance was just about equal to when the person gave a valid reason. So sometimes people just need to hear a reason. There's a because meter in your brain where that's why it made you crazy when your parents would say, just listen to me because I said so. You'd be like, so you need a valid because. So as long as you have that valid because, and you don't come up like, I don't eat gluten because gluten is bad, right? People are like, I don't really get that. But if, for example, you were to say, I don't eat gluten because if I do, I have a horrible allergic reaction. Yeah. I don't think people are going to call you out for that. So just think about it. Come up with that quick why soundbite. And then if you do find people that press you even after that why soundbite, I mean, maybe they're self-selecting themselves out of your social circle, because people that are going to criticize you for your medical needs and your spiritual needs, I'm not sure I want to associate with those people in the first place.
Well, I love that you're giving validation for going sane. Not that we really need it. I mean, internally, I think everybody knows, yeah, of course, if I just want to eat healthy, I can eat healthy. But I think this is almost kind of a warning, or let's just let you know before you get started, before you go out there and start telling everybody, not everyone's going to be as excited about it as you are. And I think we need to make that really clear and let people know, yeah, some people are going to think you're crazy, but you have your reason. You tie it back to whatever it is you want to tie it back to. I love it. Any reason is good. It seems like people just need a reason. But I think that there are so many valid reasons that are so easy to talk about. And I think when it's just done in a way that's, kind of humble, just kind of, I'm not trying to impose my beliefs on anybody, but this is why I'm doing it, and this is what I believe in. I think that most people are really happy for you for the most part. And yeah, they might not know what to feed you if they invite you over for dinner, but I think that gives us more reasons to invite people to come to our homes for dinner, to be able to open our lives. And I found like that's one of my main challenges is I'm an awful hostess. I don't have platters. I don't have tablecloths. That's not my thing. And so I'm always really hesitant to have people over. When you and Angela came to visit our family, I was totally stressed out. Like, I don't even know how to do any of this. Fortunately, you guys were so easy. But I found that as I'm learning how to just open up my life and open up my home and not ever feel like I have to apologize, whether I'm apologizing for not having a pretty tablecloth or whether I'm apologizing for not having a lot of sugar, I feel like letting people into your life, that's what people want. They want to spend time with you. They aren't coming to see your house or to see your place settings or to see some fancy garnish. They're coming because they want to have time to be with you in your life or in your home. And I think that when we can just make sure that we're not creating these walls between us and other people. Oh, I'm saying those people I'm not associating them anymore. I mean, you have so many reasons out there that you can divide yourself from everybody else in the world. But when we can start breaking those down and be able to really be respectful of each other for what really matters to each person, I think, not that we're just trying to build world peace here, but we kind of are. We're just essentially saying you can live sane, you can be a good example, you can be respectful of other people. And as you're out there showing people you're very normal and you're very approachable, and this really isn't stressful to interact with me, even though I'm not the same way you are, I think that's how you're able to help actually spread this good information so that other people might want to try it too.
I love it, April. Well, in the tradition that you've taught me, do you mind if we close? Because I know I've taken this completely off track of our notes,
totally
but
off track. It's okay.
I do have a next action and a stretch goal that I'd like to share with people.
Please do.
All right. So the next action, and we always do this, the next action is a little bit easier, and the stretch goal is always more of a stretch. So it's going to be more of a stretch. Don't worry. But the next action is just try to think about sanity on some level, like someone who has a peanut allergy. Right? Like food allergies, quite common. And people aren't like, dang it, Billy, you and your peanut allergy. I wish you wouldn't go into anaphylactic shock all the time. Right? So just try to change your mindset a little bit about that. And then if there's, honestly, we're all pre-diabetic. Technically, we're all pre-cancerous and we're all pre-Alzheimer's. The pre-blank just means you don't have this disease yet. So just come up, the next action is think of a quick and more medically oriented way that you can, I mean, diabetes is my go-to, right? Even like weight loss has a stigma around it. Not becoming diabetic doesn't. So honestly, if it's just a quick next action, write down a sentence where you can say something along the lines of, like, here's what I say personally when I go to restaurants. When I go to restaurants, I say, I'm pre-diabetic. Could you double the vegetables and hold the starch? And that's 100% honest. I'm not diabetic. I could become diabetic in the future. Therefore, I am pre-diabetic. So as a next action, I would recommend trying to customize something like that. So it's a quick sound bite where you can say, hey, just like if you had a peanut allergy, you say, oh, by the way, I'm allergic to peanuts. I'm so sorry if that's an inconvenience, but I just need to give you the heads up. I'm allergic to peanuts. Easy. So, hey, I'm pre-diabetic. Or, hey, if you were diabetic, you'd say, hey, I'm diabetic. And people aren't going to make you feel uncomfortable, right? So just come up with a quick talking point like that, which isn't holier than thou. It's not about weight loss. It's not about being skinny. It's about avoiding diabetes. And then for the stretch goal, and this is going to be a little bit of a stretch, I'm going to try to describe it as quickly as I can, but I recently heard something in an audiobook that I'm just pining to share with people.
Good.
and that is a lot of what we've talked about here is a little bit of, I think that Mary thinks, that Thomas thinks, that I might be thinking about, right? So it's this internal is, who's thinking what about who and da. Well, sometimes we might think that someone thinks something about us that they don't actually think, and we create the second world in our brain, the second reality. So just An exercise that's really helped me, and a distinction that's really helped me, is anytime you're talking to yourself, there's a speaker and there's a listener, right? In order for you to speak to yourself, there has to be two parties. There has to be someone talking and there has to be someone listening. And what you'll notice is that listener is just quiet and peaceful. The speaker is the one who's full of anxiety, who's full of like, oh my gosh, all these people think things about me. Like, that's what Freud called your ego. That's not really you. Like, the thing that's really you is the quiet listener that's just listening. So the stretch goal is, I would just ask, if at all possible, try it. It's very hard. It's not easy. But if you can just observe yourself having these thoughts, like having, oh my God, Mary thinks that if I think that she thinks that Thomas thinks that Billy thinks, some of that might not actually be real. And if it's not real, then you really don't need to worry about it because it's not actually there. So as a stretch goal, can we observe our own thoughts about this? Because I wonder how many of those are literally just our thoughts about it. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I'd heard a quote that I'm going to quote very badly because I don't have it word for word, but it was something like, if you're worried about what people are thinking about you, you might be surprised how little they actually are. And I think about that all the time because it's true. You think everybody's out there with this checklist of everything I'm supposed to be and do and have, and they're checking all of my responsibilities, and they know that my car hasn't been washed in a month, and they know that, all these things I haven't done. It's really not true. Most people are thinking more about themselves or about their own responsibilities. They're really not all that concerned about you. And so I think when you realize you're not being observed as closely as you think you are. And I'm living with teenagers right now. And so this is something that we have to talk about all the time because, when you're a teenager, you're kind of concerned that everybody's watching your hair and your clothes and your every move. And maybe that is true a little more when you're a teenager. But I agree. If you can, I love those two voices that you talked about, and recognizing that you don't have to be always concerned and always thinking that everybody is there to find a fault with you. In fact, it's typically quite the opposite.
Oh, I love this, April. Well, this is my kind of podcast. I love these metaphysical, heady podcasts. But we promise the listeners that in the next show we're gonna do something similar, but we're gonna do more typical.
Well, because I have a list. I have a list of all the reasons people think SANE are crazy. So we're gonna go through those, and we're gonna help to kind of squash those and help people know what to say. So this has been a wonderful SANE show. Really excited about the next action and the stretch goal. I think it's totally doable, coming up with our why, coming up with that reason, and not worrying so much about what other people think about us. So thanks again for being with us, and remember to stay sane.